The summer of 2014 was the kind that clung to your skin, hot, restless, and filled with the kind of nights that made people reckless. I still remember the sound of cicadas buzzing like static in the trees, the way the air smelled like pine and gasoline when we drove out of town. I was 22, just old enough to think I understood danger, and stupid enough to test it. It started when Mason found the lake house. He'd been scrolling through some online sublease site, hunting for a cheap getaway before summer ended. 3 bedrooms, dock access, no neighbors for miles. The ad sounded too good to be true, but the pictures sold it. Rustic, quiet, a perfect hideaway. There were 5 of us. Mason, his girlfriend Claire, my best friend Dylan, his sister Ava, and me. We'd all grown up in the same small town in Oklahoma where the most exciting thing to do after dark was sit at the Sonic parking lot. A weekend by the lake sounded like freedom. The drive out there took 4 hours. The sun was melting behind the tree line when we turned off the highway onto a dirt road, our car bouncing over potholes. The GPS lost signal halfway through, and the deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to swallow us. When we finally saw the lake, it looked like glass. The house itself was old, a 2-story wooden cabin perched on a hill, its porch sagging slightly, its windows catching the last of the sunlight. Someone had left a wind chime by the door, and it clinked lazily in the breeze. Creepy, Ava muttered. Authentic, Mason grinned. Come on, it's perfect. Inside, the place smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The furniture looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but everything worked. There was even an old Polaroid camera sitting on the counter, a note beside it in faded ink. Take memories, not things. That first night felt like every summer cliché. We grilled on the porch, drank cheap beer, told ghost stories under a swarm of stars. The lake reflected everything. Firelight, laughter, the blur of our faces. But there was one thing that didn't reflect. The dock. I noticed it around midnight. The water shimmered under the moon, but the dock was a dark, empty shape, like it was absorbing light instead of catching it. When I pointed it out, Dylan just laughed. Probably algae, he said, or your brain on Bud Light. I laughed too, but my stomach nodded. Later, when everyone went inside, I stayed on the porch. The night was thick with humidity, and the sound of insects had faded. Then I heard it, a splash, not big, just enough to ripple the silence. I leaned over the railing, squinting toward the dock. Something moved. At first I thought it was Mason, but this figure was wrong. Too still, too pale. It stood ankle-deep in the water, facing the lake. Then slowly it turned toward the house. I froze. It looked like a man, but his face. It shimmered, like a reflection that couldn't hold its shape. The moment I blinked, he was gone. I ran inside, heart slamming against my ribs. Mason was snoring on the couch. Claire was asleep in his lap. Ava and Dylan were upstairs. Nobody else was awake. The next morning I told them what I'd seen. Mason laughed. You probably saw your reflection. No, I said. He was in the water. Then it's a fisherman, Ava suggested. This is a lake, not outer space. But when we went outside, there were no footprints near the dock. The mud was untouched. That day, things started to feel wrong in ways I couldn't explain. The heat felt heavier. The woods seemed to watch us. Every sound carried too far. The crack of branches, the low groan of the dock. And then we found the journal. It was hidden under one of the loose floorboards in the living room, old and water-stained. The first page was dated 1983. The handwriting was shaky. The ink smeared. He comes when it's hot enough to make the air bleed, it read. Always from the lake, always at night. Don't look at his face. We laughed it off. At least Mason did. Claire didn't. She was quiet the rest of the day, sitting by the window like she was listening for something. That night we tried to play music to fill the silence. The Bluetooth speaker cut out twice. Dylan swore he saw someone moving between the trees. We stayed up until 3 a.m., drinking, pretending we weren't scared. When we finally went to bed, I heard the wind chime outside the door. It was barely moving, but the sound didn't match the rhythm of the wind. It was offbeat, deliberate, like someone was touching it. And then came the scratching, slow, measured, at the door. I whispered Mason's name, but he was out cold. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the door's bottom gap. A shadow moved beneath it, 2 feet standing just outside, bare feet. Then the doorknob turned. It stopped after a second. A faint whisper followed, low and wet, like it came through water. Don't look. The next morning, there were wet footprints on the porch, leading from the dock to our front door. That was the day everything started to unravel. The morning sunlight filtered through the cabin's thin curtains, soft and golden, but it felt wrong, too calm, too silent. The lake outside looked smooth as glass again, and the air smelled faintly of rot. I woke before anyone else. My mouth was dry, my head pounding from cheap beer, and a night of half-sleep filled with whispers I couldn't tell were dreams. For a moment I convinced myself I'd imagined it, the scratching, the voice, the wet footprints, until I stepped outside. They were still there, damp, smeared ovals across the wooden porch, leading from the direction of the dock straight to the front door. Bare feet, human size. I crouched down. The prints were darkened by moisture, but the edges weren't soaked like mud, more like something slick had left them. Water mixed with something else. I touched one with my finger. The wood was cold, colder than the morning air. A screen door creaked behind me. "Dude, what are you doing?" Dylan's voice was thick with sleep. I turned, trying to find words. "Someone came here last night, look." He squinted, stepped closer, then frowned. "You're kidding. That's—" He trailed off, eyes widening. "That's not you, is it?" I shook my head. We followed the trail down the steps and along the dirt path toward the dock. The prints faded halfway there. Not like they stopped walking, but like the person had evaporated. The dock itself was still dark, still reflecting nothing. Claire and Mason joined us minutes later, coffee mugs in hand, confused by our silence. When they saw the prints, the color drained from Claire's face. "Okay," Mason said, clapping once, forcing a laugh that didn't sound right. "Maybe it rained last night, maybe—" "It didn't rain," Claire cut in. Her voice trembled. "I was up around 2. The sky was clear." Ava appeared at the top of the path, holding something in her hand. "You guys need to see this." It was another Polaroid. Old, sun-faded, edges curled. She said she'd found it stuck behind the living room mirror. The photo showed the lake at night, the dock barely visible. But there was a figure on it. Tall, standing at the edge, facing the camera. Its reflection on the water wasn't right. It looked warped, twisted inward, like the surface was swallowing it. Someone had scribbled across the bottom in black ink, "Don't turn your back to him." The air grew thick. None of us spoke for almost a full minute. Then Mason finally forced a laugh again. "Okay, this is probably someone's idea of a prank. We're literally in an Airbnb horror movie setup." But his voice cracked on prank. We spent most of that day trying to act normal. Mason and Dylan went into town to pick up more food and firewood. Ava and Claire stayed inside, cleaning up and reorganizing the rooms. I sat on the porch again, staring at the lake. That's when I noticed something new. The dock, the same one that hadn't reflected light the night before, now had something tied underneath it. At first I thought it was just debris or driftwood, but as the sun hit it I saw the shape clearer. It looked like a bag, heavy, waterlogged and tied with rope. A chill ran down my spine. I went closer, the boards creaking under my feet. The water lapped lazily against the wood. When I crouched I saw that the rope wasn't new. It was frayed, covered in algae. Whatever this was, it had been there for a long time. Then the bag moved, just slightly, but enough to make the water ripple. I stumbled back, heart pounding. By the time Mason and Dylan returned, the bag was gone. I told them what I saw, but they just exchanged glances. "You sure you're okay, man?" Dylan asked softly. "You didn't, dream that?" I didn't answer, because deep down, part of me wanted to believe I had dreamed it. That night, everything fell apart. We'd built a fire pit near the waterline, roasting marshmallows, laughing too loudly, the forced laughter of people trying to drown out fear. Mason turned up the music on his Bluetooth speaker, but the signal kept cutting out, static whispering in between songs. At 10:17 p.m. the music stopped entirely. The air felt heavy, charged, like before a thunderstorm. Claire shivered. "It's too quiet," and it was no insects, no frogs, nothing but the soft pulse of the lake. Then Ava froze, staring toward the trees. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We all turned, a rustle, then a voice. A man's voice, low, wet, like words dragged through a throat full of water. "Don't. Look." Every hair on my body stood up. The fire crackled. Mason shone his flashlight toward the sound, sweeping it across the tree line. Nothing. Then we heard footsteps. Not running, walking, slow, deliberate, coming closer. "Someone's screwing with us," Mason muttered, standing up. He grabbed a fire poker, shoulders squared. "Mason, don't!" Claire hissed. He ignored her, stepping toward the sound. The light caught movement, a pale shape slipping between trees. "Hey, who the hell are you?" Mason shouted. No response. He took another step, and another. Then the light from his phone flickered, once, twice, before going completely black. We heard his breath hitch, then silence. Mason? Nothing. The flashlight in my hand trembled. I pointed it toward where he'd been standing. There was no one there. Claire screamed his name and bolted forward, but Dylan grabbed her. "Wait!" Something moved at the edge of the lake. The water rippled outward, as if something heavy had just climbed in. "Mason!" Claire screamed again. Then the music came back on, not from the speaker by the fire, from inside the cabin. The same song we'd been playing earlier, but distorted, slowed down, every note drowning in static. We ran. The cabin door was open when we reached it. The wind chime clinked once as we passed. Inside, the lights were flickering. The song played from somewhere deeper in the house, echoing faintly down the hall. Dylan crept forward, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. The sound led us to the living room. The Bluetooth speaker sat on the table, screen flashing between connected and unknown device. The Polaroid camera was beside it, and it had taken a picture. The photo ejected slowly, curling as it developed. Ava picked it up with shaking hands. It was a picture of us, sitting around the fire, except Mason wasn't in it. Instead, standing behind us was that same tall, pale figure, blurred like motion caught mid-frame. His face was smeared into the lake's reflection, and at the bottom of the photo, in wet black ink, were new words that hadn't been there before. "He's mine now." The moment that Polaroid developed, the air in the cabin seemed to change. The smell of the lake came in through the walls, wet wood, algae, and something faintly metallic, like blood left out in the sun. Claire dropped the photo as if it had burned her. "What does that mean?" she whispered. No one answered. Ava picked the picture back up, staring at it like she could find some hidden explanation if she looked long enough. "He's mine now," she read again under her breath. Her hands shook. Dylan stepped closer to the window, scanning the darkness. "He has to be out there. Maybe he fell. Maybe—" "Don't," Claire snapped. "Don't make it sound like he just wandered off." But none of us wanted to say the word taken. The speaker stopped playing mid-song. The silence that followed wasn't normal silence. It was heavy, pressing into our ears. We all heard something else underneath it, slow breathing from somewhere nearby. I turned toward the hallway. The breathing stopped, then something dripped onto the floorboards. A drop, then another. Claire's flashlight beam found it first, dark, wet spots leading down the hall toward the bathroom. We followed, too afraid to split up, too afraid to stop. The bathroom door was half closed. The sound of water running came from inside, but when Dylan pushed the door open, the sink and tub were both dry. The sound wasn't from the plumbing. It was coming from the ceiling vent. Drip, drip, drip. A single droplet fell from the vent, landing on Dylan's shoulder. He touched it, then frowned. "It's not water," he said softly. "It's thicker." I didn't want to ask, but I did anyway. "Thicker how?" He turned his palm over under the flashlight. The liquid glistened dark red. Claire screamed. Dylan stumbled back, wiping his hand on his shirt. The dripping stopped, and then something moved inside the vent, a scraping sound, metal bending slightly, like something dragging itself deeper into the ducts. Ava's voice broke. "We have to go now." No one argued. We grabbed whatever we could, keys, phones, shoes, and ran for the door. But when we stepped outside, the air felt different. The fog that had rolled over the lake earlier was now crawling up the hill toward the cabin. Thick, low, and alive. We couldn't see the car, the headlights, the road, even the trees had vanished into the gray. "Stay together," Dylan said, gripping Claire's hand and motioning for us to move. We took the steps down from the porch and started toward where the car had been parked. Halfway down the path, something brushed past my leg. I jumped, swinging my flashlight. Nothing there. The fog muffled every sound. Then, footsteps, behind us, we froze. They were slow, steady, crunching on gravel. Dylan turned his light back toward the cabin. The fog shifted. For a second, we saw a shape, tall, human-like, but its outline rippled as if underwater, its head tilted to one side. Claire whispered Mason's name, voice cracking. The figure moved closer. "No," Dylan hissed, dragging her back. "That's not him." We ran. The fog thickened until the world turned white. I could barely see Ava's silhouette ahead of me. The air was so damp it hurt to breathe. My shoes slipped in the mud as we reached the clearing where the car should have been, empty. "It was right here," Dylan yelled. "I parked it right here." But there was only wet earth and weeds. Ava spun in a circle. "How the hell do you lose a car?" Claire started crying, quiet, shaking sobs. I wanted to comfort her, but my own heartbeat was too loud. The fog pressed closer, curling around our feet. That's when I noticed it. Footprints forming in the mud beside us. 1, 2, 3. No one was moving. The prints stretched in a line leading from the woods, stopping only a few feet away. Then another print appeared, pressing down as if under an invisible foot. And another, moving toward us. "Run!" I screamed. We sprinted back toward the cabin, not because it was safe, but because it was the only place we knew. The fog chased us, swallowing the path behind. By the time we slammed the door shut, Claire was gasping, clutching her chest. Ava fell to her knees, whispering a prayer. And then, faintly, from the woods outside came a sound that froze all of us. A man's voice, soft, almost gentle. "Don't look." The same words as before, only this time it sounded exactly like Mason. Claire screamed again, lunging toward the door, but Dylan caught her. "That's not him." "How do you know?" she cried. "Because he's dead," Dylan snapped. The words hung in the air. None of us wanted to believe them, but deep down we did. The power went out a second later. The cabin plunged into darkness. Only my flashlight remained, its beam shaking across the walls. The sound of dripping returned, closer now. We followed it to the living room. The journal we'd found earlier was lying open on the floor, even though no one had touched it since yesterday. New words were written across the page, the ink still glistening wet. "He belongs to the lake now. Soon, you will too." I backed away slowly. "We have to get out in daylight," I said. "As soon as it's morning, we run, fog or no fog." No one argued. We blocked the doors with furniture and took turns staying awake. At 2:13 a.m., while I was on watch, I heard something tapping against the window. Soft, rhythmic. I aimed the flashlight and saw a hand pressed against the glass, pale, webbed, fingertips split like wet paper. And through the glass that distorted face again, half of it Mason's, half of it something else. It smiled. Then it whispered, perfectly clear this time. "You shouldn't have come back." The glass cracked. I stumbled back, shouting for the others. Dylan grabbed the fire poker again, eyes wide. But when the window finally shattered inward, nothing came through, just a rush of cold air and the faint scent of lake water. We stayed huddled together until the first gray light of dawn crept across the floor. When we finally opened the door, the fog was gone. The sky was blue again, the lake calm, peaceful, like nothing had happened. The car was back in the clearing, covered in lakeweed, and inside, in the passenger seat, sat Mason. His skin was pale, lips blue, his eyes stared blankly ahead, his seatbelt was fastened, and his shirt was soaked. Claire screamed until her voice broke. Dylan checked for a pulse, nothing. Then Ava whispered, "Look at his wrist." On Mason's right wrist was a rope mark, deep, circular, still wet, like he'd been tied to something underwater. We didn't speak for a long time after finding Mason. The sun had climbed high over the lake, burning the fog away, yet the light did nothing to warm us. Claire sat on the ground beside the car, staring at him through the windshield as if the longer she looked, the more likely he'd blink. Dylan finally covered Mason's face with his jacket. "We have to tell someone." Ava nodded. "There's a ranger station 15 minutes back toward the highway." 15 minutes sounded simple, but when we turned the key in the ignition, the car didn't even cough. The battery was dead. I checked my phone. No signal, not even a flicker of bars. That was when the quiet started again. Not ordinary quiet, but that heavy stillness that felt like a held breath. The trees didn't move, the water didn't ripple, and every sound we made seemed swallowed by the air itself. We agreed to walk. The station couldn't be that far. We packed a backpack with water and snacks and left the cabin unlocked. Claire refused to leave Mason behind, so we promised to send help immediately. She stayed, sitting on the porch with the Polaroid camera clutched tight in both hands. The path through the woods should have been simple, but after 10 minutes, it began to curve in directions none of us remembered. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through trees that seemed thicker, closer together. Ava stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" It was faint, but real. A rhythmic scratching, Not from ahead, from beneath us. We moved slowly, scanning the ground until Dylan kicked away a layer of leaves and uncovered a square of wood hidden in the dirt. A hatch, old and swollen from moisture. "What is that?" Ava whispered. The metal ring on the hatch creaked when Dylan pulled it. A wave of cold air escaped, carrying a smell like the lake at night. The space below was pitch black. I aimed my flashlight down. Steps descended into what looked like a crawl space. Walls lined with rotting boards. We should have closed it and kept walking. But curiosity and fear are siblings. They push you in the same direction. Dylan went first. Ava and I followed. The space was narrow. We had to crouch. Water dripped steadily somewhere ahead. Halfway through the tunnel, the walls changed. What had been wood became something rougher, carved. When I shone the light closer, I realized they were marks, rows and rows of names scratched into the boards. Some faded, some fresh. The newest read, Mason Carter, 2014. Ava gasped. He didn't write that. He couldn't have. The scratching noise returned, louder now, behind the wall. Something moved on the other side, slow, dragging, following our breath. Dylan's voice was a whisper. "We're leaving, now!" We scrambled back toward the hatch, but when we climbed out, the forest around us wasn't the same. The trees were closer, darker, their branches tangled overhead like ribs, and directly ahead stood the cabin. We hadn't turned around. We'd been walking straight the whole time, yet we were back. Claire was gone. The front door hung open, swaying in the breeze. On the porch railing, the Polaroid camera rested. A new photograph still developing. The image showed the three of us inside the crawl space. Our flashlights shining, our faces pale. Someone had taken it from behind us. Dylan snatched the photo and tore it in half. "We're done with this place," he said. But when we stepped inside, the house felt alive. The wood creaked in a pattern, not random, like footsteps pacing above us, inside the walls, under the floor. "Claire?" I called. A faint reply came from upstairs. "I'm here." We ran up, hoping to rise and die all at once. Her voice led us to the far bedroom, the one with the broken lock. The door was closed. A whisper came again, softer. "Don't look." Dylan reached for the knob, but the door swung open before he touched it. The room was empty, except the walls. They were moving. At first it looked like water stains, dark patches spreading across the wallpaper. Then the pattern shifted, swelling outward as if something beneath the surface was breathing. Ava screamed and stumbled back. The wall bulged once more, then flattened, leaving only wet handprints sliding down the paint. We backed into the hall. The air smelled of the lake again. From somewhere below, the old radio crackled to life, playing static that almost formed words. Dylan grabbed my arm. "We have to find Claire. We have to get out." A sudden crash from downstairs cut him off. We ran down the steps. The living room lights flickered weakly as if struggling against something heavier than darkness. In the center of the floor, the furniture we'd piled against the door had been moved aside neatly, and written across the floorboards in dripping black streaks were the words, "She saw him." Ava covered her mouth. "She looked," she whispered. Behind us the floor groaned, boards lifted slightly, one after another, in a slow line leading toward the lake-facing wall. The sound of water trickled beneath them, spreading wider. Dylan grabbed his bag. "Forget everything. We're running." We burst out the front door into the late afternoon light. The sun was already sliding behind the hills, the lake a flat mirror. On the dock stood Claire. Her hair clung to her shoulders as if she'd just stepped out of the water. She was facing the lake, unmoving. "Claire!" Ava shouted. She didn't respond. We ran halfway down the path before the boards under her feet began to creak. She turned her head slightly, just enough for us to see her profile. Her eyes were open, but they were the color of the lake, murky gray-green, depthless. And behind her reflection, beneath the surface, something shifted, tall, pale, waiting. She smiled faintly, the way someone might in recognition. Then she stepped forward. The water closed over her without a splash. Ava screamed. Dylan pulled her back as the dock shuddered once, then went still. The lake rippled outward, swallowing the last circles of light until only calm remained. For a long time none of us spoke. Then Dylan said quietly, "He took her too." We turned back toward the house, but a new sound followed us, knocking, from inside the walls again. 3 slow knocks, then silence. When night came, we barricaded ourselves upstairs, listening. Every so often the knocking changed direction, as if it was searching for us. I don't remember falling asleep, only the dream that came, the lake under a full moon, faces rising just beneath the surface, mouths open as if trying to speak. When I woke, gray light filled the room. The knocking had stopped, but the wallpaper near the bed had peeled away, revealing a new set of names carved into the wood. Ours, all three. And beside them, an unfinished fourth one, waiting for the next visitor. The morning after Claire vanished was quiet in a way that made the skin crawl. No birds, no wind, just the slow drip of water from the roof, like the house was bleeding through its own walls. Ava woke